Hello, our Truth Warriors. Today's guest has gone from Club MC to a voice of the people on Speaker's Corner and many large events. He has grabbed the world's attention with his sharp, smart, and well-produced Rise Up videos, and he's certainly someone to watch and enjoy, and I know he's going places. Lance Double MC, shout out to the world, liberty to be free. If only they awake, so all can just see. This hoax without coax postulates we agree. Welcome to the Atlantic Underground podcast, and sorry for my substandard attempt there. A true brother in arms, Lance, I know you can do better than that, so let's hear what you've got, please.
Oh, come on, don't put me on the spot.
Come on!
That's Chris. I thought that was really very good. But if I was going to say something, I would probably say something like, Corona, the crown of your highness, or the molecule inside your sinus. Is this Wuhan bronchitis, or the actors of medical mafia pirates? 3 million came from Obama. Dr. Fauci, big pharma. Move it to Wuhan, ring the alarma. It's our virus, yo, that's karma. I'll probably say something like that.
Hey!
To be honest, it's actually been quite a long time since I've really got into music. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've been mainly concerned with combat sports emceeing, like boxing, MMA. I've actually got a professional, or I did before the industry finished, had a professional boxing MC license. Do a lot of professional MMA, some international stuff as well. So, yeah, bit of a varied career before all this happened, and I started to become vocal with what I've been researching over the years and really putting it together and presenting it to other people. That's something I've only started doing this year.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on, Lance, with us. I know you're a busy man these days, and we really appreciate your time. So to start off, I'd like to ask you about something you've been doing a lot of research on, and that's the Chinese track and trace system. I'd like to ask you about that, and that's currently set up for the COVID-19. And why do you believe this is what they're planning for the rest of us?
I spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia. I've been lucky enough to go there every winter for 10 years. Performing in Thailand at the Full Moon Party. I've spent a lot of time in Laos, which is essentially owned by the Chinese Communist Party. Sadly, that beautiful country's been turned into a hydroelectric power plant to power one province in China. That's a whole other story. So I knew about the Chinese Communist Party, about the credit score, about the internment camps, about what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims, the Falun Gong. I'd researched that for quite a few years because I've been very aware of the march of the Red Dragon and what they're doing. So this Chinese credit score is quite a varied thing, and it's been introduced in stages in different provinces. In the more free provinces, it's sort of like a percentage, and it goes from 0 to 100. So obviously, you need to be over 50 to be a favourable citizen. Once you're getting up to the 80s and 90s, you get special privileges like high-speed internet, special access to certain aspects of society, basically. But once you go to the undesirable levels, limited travel. Oh my God, we've got a cat on the back of the chair there. That really scared me. Diminished internet speed. If you become undesirable, you can't look after pets and things like that. Now that's in one of the free provinces. In the largest province in China, in Xinjiang, where they are predominantly ethnically Uyghur Muslims, they have a much more strict policy. It's basically a 3-tier system, and this is where it gets interesting. Because I got up on a bench 3 or 4 weeks ago in Bournemouth, and I started talking about this 3-tier system that they had in China, which is basically, and they actually integrated it with their own track and trace. It's exactly the same. In Xinjiang, it was basically trustworthy, untrustworthy, or maybe. So there's only 3 choices in this credit score. If you're a trustworthy citizen, you have normal access to society. If you have the maybe score, then you have limited access. But if you're deemed untrustworthy, then essentially you have no access, limited access to society, and you're on your way to the re-education center. Now, in that province, if you are born ethnically a Uyghur Muslim, you are immediately put into the maybe category. So you can see that there's quite a disparity there. So I was talking about that on a bench in Bournemouth, and I said there's a 3-tier system, and within 3 days, so this is 2 weeks ago, Boris announced a regional 3-tier system in this country. Now our one actually starts at yellow. We don't even have green here, which I thought was quite interesting. It's just yellow, orange, and red. Now let's be fair. It's a regional system here, like they also have in China. So they have a personal system integrated with a regional system. So at the moment in China, when you travel around, you have a QR code, When you go into different regions, your QR code is scanned and it comes up green, orange, or red, depending on your interactions and how many people you've been there. You can see the parallels between our track and trace system. It's been trialed in China. It's exactly the same infrastructure, exactly the same technology. It has exactly the same capabilities, and it is basically what has been trialed in China for the last 5-6 years going back and been perfected. There, it's all based on the facial recognition AI, which is probably quite a few years more advanced than what we've got over here at the moment. See, ours is going to be based off an app. So there's massive parallels. And here's the other thing. Through my research into things like ID 2020, which is the global plan from Bill Gates, Gavi, Microsoft, which is obviously still Bill Gates, Rockefeller Foundation, Accenture, and a few others, and MasterCard, to basically provide a digital ID platform, a biometric ID for every person on the planet, along with the Gavi plan to vaccinate exactly the same amount of people. So you can see there's a parallel there. So what I noticed was this is not a future plan. It's already happening in Africa. There's already 7,000 people with something called a trust stamp, which is it's a biometric digital tattoo. So there's a hypodermic needles, and in that hypodermic needles is like a nanotech ink. This is way in advance of a microchip, by the way. People are scared of an RFID chip the size of a grain of rice. That's 80s technology compared to what they're actually putting in the arms of Africans right now. So this provides a digital biometric ID. It provides a vaccine record. It also provides a payment platform for MasterCard, access to energy. It's basically a digital access platform to society. This is from a company called Trust Stamp. Now, what you very quickly realize with a bit of cursory research is that all of these companies that are involved in this are also involved in the penal system. They're all the companies that are running the private for-profit prison system, ankle tags, prisoner surveillance. So it's exactly the same infrastructure that is monitoring prisoners which are out in the community. We're essentially installing a large digital open prison.
So,
and it's exactly the same companies doing it through track and trace, vaccines, and the penal system. It's all one unit, and that's essentially what Serco is. And that's what I felt, because I already knew this, but when I started this research, I had seen Serco vans doing garbage disposal. I knew they were something to do with prisons. And as soon as I saw this thing with the 9 newspapers I talk about in the video, this light went off in my head. And I just wrote down these bullet points. This is, oh no, I'm going to find this. I remember what Nigel Farage said. I remember he mentioned Serco. I was like, oh no, they're going to be doing it with immigration too. I wrote down these bullet points. Every single one of them was true. And there was a lot more. Serco go back as far as they were involved in the war games in 9/11. So you know how NORAD was like basically disabled that day for some unknown reason. You know, the #1 air defense system in the whole world that's to protect the White House. You know, the most guarded place in the whole world, and that was the one day Serco were involved in that. It goes back to World. They go back to World War II. It's very, very deep. You know,
how long have they been around, Lance? When do you know when they actually started?
Basically, through it's not just Serco, because at the end, there was a company called Circ, which was about until 1987. Again, a big defense logistics company. This goes back to the Purbright Institute and the Pilgrim Society. So we're talking about going back to the turn of the century. We're talking about like the Round Table and Cecil Rhodes. These are the guys that laid the foundations for the Purbright Institute. Edward de Worms Rothschild, Lord Purbright. And this, all the funny thing is, the crazy thing about this is Serco, Purbright, and there's another one, Kinetic with a Q, all owned by the Crown. They're all within 75 miles of my house, all 3 of the installations. They're all in the southwest of England. I drive past Kinetic every day, the big sign, big Q, Kinetic Q. Also responsible for foot and mouth, the Purbright Institute. If you draw a picture of the foot and mouth outbreak and you draw a circle right in the center, is the Purbright Institute. And they were fined millions of pounds for it as well. I got fact checks on that. They said, your claim, the Purbright Institute were responsible for foot and mouth. Actual fact, the Purbright Institute were fined £3 million for a pipe. It's like, what kind of fact checking is that? Here's another great one of the fact checkers. I said that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust is one of their trusts had invested, had bought 200,000 shares in the particular part of Serco that ran the for-profit prisons. Claim incorrect. Bill Gates actually has 3.6 million shares. So how is that fact checking me? That's confirming what I found and then multiplying it by 10.
I know.
So, you know, Reuters, they're supposed to be what, like the front page of the mainstream media conglomerate, like the front page and all the other mainstream media outlets get it from Reuters. Absolute garbage. Totally misquoted me. Absolute garbage.
But it's, you know, Reuters and AP, as it's called, you know, they are the feed to all the news groups.
Absolutely.
So, you know, this is what they want to do. They want, it's like, you know, they want, you see these videos online on YouTube where every newscaster is saying exactly the same thing, and they'll fill the screen up with everyone saying the same thing because they're all taking the same feed from the same source.
Montage. That's amazing. Whoever put that together took the time to do that. That's a real I showed that to people and they're like, yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. I was like, well, you don't think that this is significant? You've got what? 6x6 grid of all of these different news stations literally speaking in unison. You think that's not significant? That's not Operation Mockingbird in effect? I mean, come on.
That's it, yeah. People are just saying it's a coincidence. No such thing.
Lance, can we talk about the relationship between Serco and the Pirbright Institute?
What it seems to me is, if I was going to draw a parallel between the UK and the US, the Pirbright Institute's like the Rockefeller Foundation. So that's the research. So the Pirbright Institute, they actually mainly specialize in research into virology involving outbreaks in livestock. So where have all of the big respiratory pandemics, according to the mainstream narrative, come from? Swine flu. Yeah. This one apparently came from a bat soup. So there's, so there's also the patent thing.
Yeah.
Serco run the US Patent Office. And there's a huge controversy about this as well, because apparently, I mean, this off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly when they took it over, some time back in the 90s. But it was almost as if they suddenly were in control of the US Patent Office. Somebody started asking questions, how did this happen? And the transfer papers don't exist anymore. So it was almost like there's some sort of criminal takeover. Now, while they've been there, they have granted Pirbright, I believe, 3 different patents on coronaviruses. There are over 60 different patents on all the different derivatives and the, I can never say the word, attenuated viral hybrids of coronavirus. Because when they're building these vaccines, they hybridize the viruses with different strains from different animals to make them more powerful, more virile, so they can speed up the replication process, to speed up the research. And each time they patent it. I believe, I've seen the paperwork to say that the Pirbright Institute have 3 of those patents that were all granted by Serco. Another little funny part of the story is, you know, Serco and Kinetic are owned by Crown Corporation Services, which is a limited company, which is apparently a public limited company. However, the golden share of it through the Privy Council is owned by the Crown Estate. Who's that owned by? The Crown. Right. Who's the Crown? What does Corona mean? Corona means crown. So this is the crown of the virus in more ways than one. It's not just because the molecule looks like a crown. Whether people want to take it to that esoteric level and put any significance behind that or not is completely up to them, but it's there.
Yeah.
So, you know, this really goes, and you know, to link it in with the Rockefeller Foundation, they were heavily funding eugenics and what the Third Reich were doing, even after it came out in the trials, in some Nuremberg trials, that the Third Reich were basically doing these racial purity, you know, horrible experiments or whatever happened. Rockefeller Foundation continued to fund that after that. The Pirbright Institute and Lord Pirbright and Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table, they were the guys that started the concentration camps in the Boer Wars, which were used for eugenics experiments, trialing vaccines. So you start to see a parallel and a narrative forming here between eugenicists, concentration camps, human experiments, vaccines, research institutes, and it's a very, very, very sinister picture.
So it almost looks like they've been mastering their art over this period of time, and right now it's maybe this is the biggest global rollout they've ever been able to
And then
do
we
with
come to the
this.
simulations as well. Now,
Yeah.
many people know about Event 201, and if your viewers haven't heard about Event 201, this is a roundtable simulation exercise that was run by John Hopkins, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, I say it, it's just so funny to keep saying the name every time. They're always involved in everything. So in October 2019, they simulated 66 million people dying from an outbreak of coronavirus. Funnily enough, it came from pigs. So this is the way people go at it. Oh, it's not. It wasn't a COVID simulation because it wasn't bats. It was pigs. I'm pretty sure the fictional farmyard host of the virus is pretty irrelevant in the story. Yeah, let's face it. So they simulated killing 66 million people in 7 months. If you watch the videos from Event 201, it looks pretty much like a roundtable with the World Health Organization. It looks real, but most people just go that far. There are actually 4 or 5 different other simulations going back in time. One in 2018 called Cadex, which is more of a bioweapon, which killed about 30 million. There was one called Crimson Infection. There's one called Operation Dark Winter, going back to 2001. And it's almost as if, to me, because there are always respiratory outbreaks, always starting usually in China, as you do. It's almost like they had lots of simulations and trial runs with SARS, MERS, swine flu. Before they got it right, but it doesn't seem to me like they really have got it right. Maybe they've just got the simulation right. Because the further and further and further that I look into this, and the more that I analyse the data, and I read the ONS stats for breakfast every day, the Office of National Statistics are a fantastic resource because they don't seem to lie. They seem to present the evidence very clearly of exactly what's happening with the manipulation and the fudging of the numbers. And the more and more that I look, I cannot actually see any evidence that they haven't done anything apart from taking flu, pneumonia, and other related respiratory disease and just recategorized it.
Yeah.
You know, there's all this hoo-ha about whether we're actually dealing with a real virus or a simulated hoax. And I've been on the side of real virus for a long time, only because I've gone through the paper trail in Wuhan, and I've seen that $3.5 million through Fauci. As I said in the freestyle earlier, I've actually the bar goes all the way through it. 3.5 million from Obama through Fauci. The research was being done in the US at Fort Detrick in Texas. In 2018, there's a bad outbreak there, and they basically stopped doing the research and they resourced it to Wuhan. And they were using a coronavirus and taking a bat from a cave in Yunnan province, and that which had a type of coronavirus, and making a hybrid to work on vaccines. Now, that's all documented. They have a level 4 containment lab there. It's not filled with nothing. Yeah. So they have dangerous pathogens in that lab. So to me, all of my research took me in the direction of an accident was making the best out of, or a deliberate release to cause the economic collapse for the Great Reset. This is always the line that I was going down. The more and more I look, I think even that could be a cover story for the fact that they haven't even released the virus.
Yeah,
That's where I'm starting to go now. You know, and I am never scared to change my mind if the evidence takes me there, because all that I'm interested in is the truth.
that's
what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Can we talk about that for a sec? Because I saw one of your videos that you said that when this thing first started, you actually wore a mask
mate, when this thing first started, because of my research into the CCP, and I know how well from what I've seen, it looks like they're basically like the Third Reich on steroids, with some of the things that they're doing with the human organ harvesting with the Falun Gong. I was, because there was so much disinformation. I hadn't posted anything online for quite a while because I've been getting quite big in combat sports. I've been on BT Sport, I've been on ITV, and you know, everything was going fine, and I didn't really post anything online. When this happened, everyone started coming out of the work and saying, well, "What do you think is going on?" And I said, "Listen, I haven't decided which way they're hyping the numbers yet. They're definitely lying. I don't know whether they're hyping them up or hyping them down." So for the first 3 weeks, this is February and March, No, halfway through March. I was basically going to the supermarket like a military operation, mask, gloves, keeping away from everyone, because as far as I knew, there was a hybridized Chimera virus with HIV protein in it, because that's what the paper trail from the whistleblowers and the leaks in Wuhan attest to. And it all looks pretty convincing. It might be a very, very convincing cover story to convince people there is actually a pathogen. That's where it's taking me now. But basically, by looking at the stats, I very quickly realised that they were overplaying it. I very quickly realised when there was no evidence whatsoever of a single hospital being overrun. There was no evidence. There was one piece of footage which was supposed to be in New York of one ICU unit which looked quite busy. Then 1 week later, it got said it was in Italy. And I was like, no, because I've looked into crisis actors, I've looked into simulated media events. I've been studying that shit for years, so I've got a pretty good eye for that. I have a degree in media studies. Not that's worth the paper it's printed on, but I can analyze a source and break it down and get to the bottom of things. I like to think I can anyway. And I very quickly saw in the media, I was like, this is a very poor job. This is a very poor job. The real pandemic doesn't need billboards advertising it. It doesn't need simulated fake deaths. It doesn't need PCR test kits that are not fit for purpose to give you massive false positives. A real pandemic is visibly it's evident to everyone.
Right. Exactly.
And I've got a mate that I won't name any names. I've got various people that contact me from NHS and Public Health England, and he said, I've worked in an ICU unit in London. I have wrapped up the bodies of people a couple of people in their 30s. We don't know what it was. They came in very sick. He says, but that only happened for 1 week back in April. Since then, everything else is lies. So, I was very careful with when I came out with my decision, because people were listening to me, and I realised for the first time in a while that people were actually listening to me. What I found was there were many people over the years been watching my posts, not commenting and not liking, but actually really avidly watching. A lot of people don't want to stick their head up above the parapet and say, actually, this guy might be onto something. Because I've taken a lot of flack over the years, a lot. But I don't care. I eat it. I eat it. People can call me whatever they want. I absolutely relish it. There's nothing good about being adjusted to a completely sick world. That's no measure of sanity. So if someone thinks that everything is fine, calls me crazy or insane, that's absolutely fine. That's no problem.
It. For over a decade now, I've been researching lots of crazy shit that turned out to be true. And I never thought, that we'd get to the point where we're doing the podcast, and it's amazing how life will direct us.
Absolutely.
I mean, did you ever have an interest in what people label as conspiracies before you're doing what you are now, or is this your first leap down the rabbit hole?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm 37 years old now. So when the Twin Towers went down, what was I, 17? Before that, I as a kid, I was always very, very not hard to manage, but I was very questionable. I was never content with anything I was ever told. I was the kid that would stay up late and wait till all the other kids gone to bed and sneak down to the room where the adults were and hide behind the door and just listen to what they were saying, because I wanted to know what they were talking about more than what the kids were talking about. That's always what I was like. When the Twin Towers went down, and I watched it happen live on TV, as many people did, I instantly knew that was not right. This is just no. I didn't know why I didn't know it was right, and I couldn't quantify it whatsoever, because I was a 17-year-old kid. I remember I just started driving. Someone owed me a £5, and this is how long ago it was. I went into someone's house, drove 2 miles to get a £5 that they owed me, £5. I go into his house. He's like, "Come and get this £5." He's like, "Look at this on the TV." I was like, "Right, no." About a year after that, I saw Zeitgeist, the first Zeitgeist. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
And I watched that, and that literally made my head explode. And I just went into someone's house, and they said, "Watch this." It's 3 hours long, and they put it on, and I didn't move for 3 hours. I was like, because I'd already worked out that organized religion was a complete lie. I'd worked that out when I was about 7 years old. I'd worked out that, if there's really a God and a savior, and he definitely didn't write that book. That's for damn sure. I'd worked that out as a little kid. So when I saw Zeitgeist, that blew in my mind, and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to be happy until I've I've reverse engineered every fact in that documentary and found out if it's actually true or not. So I started to try and do that. And at that point, I hadn't really ever been on the internet before. The internet wasn't what it is now. Well, it isn't what it is now. It was 5 years ago. But anyway, that's another story. But then I came across David Icke, and it was kind of crazy because I started MCing, and this guy that was sort of my hero MC, who I started performing alongside, I went round to his house to meet him, and I'd started reading this David Icke book, Tales from the Time Loop. I went round his house, and he had the same book open. And it was open almost the same page. We were about 5 or 6 pages in, and I was like, "You started reading that book?" He's like, "Yeah, do you know about this?" I was like, "Mate, I'm reading the same book." And like ever since then, that's that, and rest is history. So I went balls deep on everything David Icke, and that was a baptism of fire. Because when you don't have any idea about any of these subjects and you read a David Icke book from start to finish, especially the old ones, like The Biggest Secret, Tales from the Time Loop, Children of the Matrix, holy as a 20-year-old guy, that literally turned me inside out. So it's like I learned about the really weird, highly detailed historical esoteric stuff of all the ancient religions and all, and I was like, I consumed it all, but there's no way I understood it. And then for the next 15 years, I back reversed that. So I went to all of the different subjects individually, the whole UFO thing, the whole hidden history and the ancient aliens and the ancient astronaut theory thing, the Sumerian tablets, the Temple tablets of Thoth. Went down that one for a few years. Then I did the whole political thing, Zionism, the neocons, etc., etc. So it's been about 20 years, and some of the stuff I used to post on Facebook 10, 15 years ago, wow, can't believe I'm still not in an asylum or something, because it's like when David Icke talks about having his turquoise phase. My turquoise phase was hardcore. I was going, I worked at a call center at the time, an insurance company for the over 50s, and I was doing all right. Apart from MCing, my day job was all sales, because you can tell I've got a bit of a mouth on me. I couldn't quite get it talking. I sell old granny's insurance, but I had my own team, and I was a manager in my bank. And when I started reading David Icke books at work, everybody knew about it. Wow. Because if I'm one of those people. If the whole world's starving and I find a pile of food, I'm not selfish. I want to point to the food. I don't keep it to myself. When I started reading David Icke books, things started falling into place because I knew that there's something seriously wrong with the world. I always knew it. I always had this dream, and I don't tell many people this. My oldest memory, I've never said this online before. My oldest memory of all time is not actually of a waking experience. It's of a dream. And it was a recurring dream. I had all through my childhood, from, I guess, the age of, my earliest memory was 5 or 6 years old, I guess, 4 years old. And I had it up to the age of 12, 12 years old. Different places, different characters, but always the same theme. And it was sort of like a disaster movie where the whole cast, classic 80s disaster movie, the whole cast is completely oblivious of the oncoming Armageddon, apart from the one character, the protagonist, which knows what's coming and is trying to warn everybody else with no luck. The problem was, throughout this recurring dream over the years that I kept having in these different settings with different characters, I was always trying to explain what was coming, but I didn't know what it was. I knew I had to explain it. I knew that it was coming. And I would always wake up at the end and I'd almost explain to them what it was about. And then I said, no. And I didn't ever know what it was about. I never knew what it was about. This year, I know what it's about.
Yeah.
And I don't care if anyone thinks that's corny or cliche. It's true.
No.
And, and someone said to me the other day, you've done many things over the years. I've been 15 years in clubs and festivals, presenting things on radio and stage, and the last 5 years in the ring and in the cage. So when it comes to my mouth and the microphone and challenges and hecklers, I can hold my own. So it seems like now, I don't know. People seem to want to listen to what I've got to say and my commentary on things. And, if it's helping anyone to wake up, if it's helping one other person to open their eyes to the reality of what's going on, then that's me. Just, I only need to wake up one other person, the law of one.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I always say, the law of one. If I can change someone's life or sow the seed Yeah. Now let's talk MMA, and let's also talk about doing U-turns on opinions on things, because for a long time I held someone up in high regard. And I'll ask you the question, Joe Rogan, rogue or renegade?
Joe Rogan was my hero.
Hmm.
He was my idol. And in many ways, I used to want to always say that I want to be the UK Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is an excellent host. He's a superb interviewer. He has the #1 podcast in the world. And over the years, he provided a platform for some of the most interesting voices to be heard to millions of people that wouldn't otherwise hear them. But unfortunately, 5 or 6 years ago, something's happened to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that he was approached
Mm-hmm.
by your classic story, some people with some very powerful influence or some very dark suits. And I've got a feeling he was probably given or made an offer that he couldn't refuse. And I'm not talking about the Spotify offer, because
No.
I noticed that I don't know if it was 5 or 6 years ago. I'm just throwing that out there. It was a period of time ago where a very clear change sort of happened, where he went from a completely open-minded person with a great platform, who was happy to speak about anything, and was, still speaks as Alex Jones, but that's another story. But he instantly U-turned on a lot of things, which you just shouldn't shut your mind off to, whatever your opinion are.
Yeah.
And he instantly, for me, it seemed to be a gatekeeper.
Yeah,
I think that's what he is now.
Yeah, and that's exactly the and I had to ask you when you were talking about the MMA, because that's exactly the way I used to watch and listen to his stuff, and I thought, this guy's so open. And then I'd say my turning point with him, he actually had a TV series out where he was looking into Bigfoot and possibility of aliens and stuff like that. And I always remember he was kind of just mocking the people that were doing it, but they never really had enough evidence to prove or disprove it. And I thought, if he's so open-minded about everything else, why would he mock these people who are trying to tell him about their experiences of the unexplained?
Yeah, he's I don't know. It's hard, because it's almost like he turned on Eddie Bravo at one point as well.
Yeah.
It's like Eddie Bravo. I mean, Eddie Bravo says some stupid things, let's face it. But everyone should have everyone should be able to say silly things. It's an entertainment show at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, I still got to say, he is what he is. He's still a fantastic interviewer, but he's not who I thought he is, unfortunately.
No.
But how cool would a David Icke interview with him be? Like, I mean, really, think about that for a minute. That to me, like, he should be interviewing someone like David Icke. I mean, I think it would just be, astronomical.
Yeah. I'm
would be
surprised
cool.
it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. It's quite crazy. There's a guy from my I'll give him a shout, Zuby, a guy that's getting really big on Twitter. He's actually a rapper from my hometown, and he's been on Joe Rogan. He got really big on Twitter. He declared himself a woman and broke the women's world heavy weightlifting championship in one day. He just said, "I'm a woman," and lifted. So he holds the women's weightlifting championship. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's sort of like, he doesn't really go into sort of quite as deep stuff as we talk about, but he's quite a good commentator on the current political events. A little bit, not a right winger. God, anyone that's sane is a right winger nowadays, aren't they?
Yeah, it seems that way.
Anyone's not a
man,
nutcase Stalin fan is basically a right winger.
I know. It's bizarre.
Big shout to Zuby. He's been on Joe Rogan's show, mate. Do you know what? If Joe invited me on there, if that ever happened, I'm not sure I'd say yes. I don't think I would. I wouldn't go on there.
They'd probably script you anyway. They'd probably say, "Oh, this is what you want to say."
Yeah, and I also heard that when he went over to Spotify, that he didn't take the Alex Jones episodes with him. That was a big thing. But then Alex Jones appeared. Was it last night? A new episode.
Yeah, he just did an interview
that's
with
a bit confusing, because Alex Jones is supposed to be like #1 captain deplatformed, $100 million deal with Spotify, and now Alex Jones is on there.
Yeah,
Alex Jones is a weird one, because obviously the story is that he's a CIA shield disinformation agent, and he sort of directs heat away from Israel towards the globalists, which isn't always such a bad interpretation. Sometimes I think Israel gets a little bit too much heat.
Yeah.
But the problem is that like over 95% of what Alex Jones says is true. So and I do think he is a disinfo agent, but he's the best disinfo agent ever, because he's offering a view of the world that's so much more factual than the mainstream media. It's like, obviously he presents it in a way that makes it look stupid because he acts crazy. But if you actually listen to what he's saying, 85 to 95% of it is quite factually true most of the time, which is quite weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, but an interesting character nonetheless. I mean, it's like, you can rule him out and say he's this, he's that. But a lot of the times with certain narratives, he's been the first person to break the news. So it's another mixed bag.
Can we talk about the recent protests that you have been going to in the UK?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you about what your impression is with the mood of the people, like when you're there at these protests and the feelings that they're having, and where do you see this movement growing? Do you feel that it's growing?
I'm going to be 100% honest. I went to the first London protest on Saturday, and I had a great time. Now, it's not going. I say have a great time. It's not about going to have a great time. I thought I had a constructive experience. Previously, I was a little bit dubious about the whole protesting, holding up a sign, and demanding your rights back, because I'm always of the thinking that if a burglar breaks into your house and steals all your stuff, what's the right course of action? You don't go to his house and stand outside with a sign saying, "Please, can I have my things back?" What I would do is I'd either go and take my things back, or I would go and get some more things, and I'd make sure that he can't steal them again. I wouldn't go and ask them back. So the whole idea of standing outside the House of Parliament saying, "Give us back our freedom," to me is a waste of time. However, what I saw when I went there, I got first of all to Speaker's Corner. I went up with like a coach with about 80 people. I didn't really have any plans apart from to try and promote my channel after getting deplatformed. I saw lots of people with various different movements. Some were anti-lockdown, some were Save the Children, a couple of people 5G. But what I saw was more of an act of defiance, a celebration of life and a celebration of freedom, and an invitation to every single person that was in the peripheral area that wasn't already part of the protest to come and join. I saw people setting an example that it's okay to carry on living your life. Here's another thing. When I looked at the BLM protest, and I've been very critical of Black Lives Matter. In fact, I'm completely against the Black Lives Matter fundamentally for everything it stands for, although I'm completely anti-racism and completely police brutality. I know what Black Lives Matter is about. That's a whole other story. I've already criticised their protest for stopping traffic in the street. We stopped traffic in the street on Saturday walking down Oxford Street, and I was having a bit of an internal battle about it. And I thought, no, this doesn't feel right to me because I've criticised people for doing this before. But then I thought to myself, I guess the difference is, if you are on like an urban intersection and you are stopping individual citizens and beating their car with batons and threatening their life, that's kind of different to doing a show of defiance in Oxford Street and stopping the buses. But what I saw when I looked around was I saw a lot of bystanders actually stopping, taking off their masks, smiling at each other, taking a deep breath, getting the cameras out and saying, "Yeah." I saw bus drivers winding their windows down, putting their masks off, going, "Yeah," and beeping the horns. And what it told me is, there's actually a massive silent majority. A massive silent majority. People think, people go, no, 95% of people are asleep. I don't even like the word. I don't like saying people are asleep. I don't like calling people zombies. It's totally counterproductive. There is a massive silent majority in this country and on your side of the pond and in Europe and everywhere that this blueprint is going out. People are not stupid. People might be the victims of trauma-based mind control, but it's only working on the subconscious. Sorry, it's only working on the conscious. It's not working on the subconscious. Subconsciously, these people can see what's going on around them. They can see that what they're being told doesn't match up with their observable reality. Even if the conscious mind is not registering it, the subconscious always registers everything. So they're still taking in that information and they're still slowly deprogramming themselves while the MK Ultra or whatever it is, the drip fear-based program is still working on the conscious mind. I've seen it with my own eyes when I've been preaching in the street with a loudspeaker, when I've been getting up on park benches and talking about the Chinese credit score and shouting at the people in River Island, when I was saying it's okay for you, you can afford to have 25% of the customers go in the shop because you're a large corporation. These small businesses can't, and businesses are shutting everywhere. You know, I've seen the look on people's faces when the penny drops, when they stop, the pushchair, the message stop here, the pushchair stops. Wait a minute, and the guy twigs. Who's this nutter with the big hair? What's he talking about? Oh, wait a minute. And when the debacle with Liverpool with the tier 3 in the gyms, I said, I got up on a bench in Bournemouth and I said, Scousers have got they've got a reputation for being militant. And I said, good. Thank you to the northern men for standing up and saying no. No is a very small word. It's only 2 letters, but don't ever underestimate how powerful it is. It's very, very powerful. So yeah, and I said, and this was this raised a few eyebrows. I said, why do you think they've gone for Liverpool first? Do you really think it's because they've got the flair of these fake cases there? Or do you think it might be a dominance thing? I said, do you know what happened in the days of the slavery plantations when they wanted to really make the slave submissive? The slave master goes for the biggest, strongest slave first, and he breaks them, whether it's beating them or sodomizing them in front of all of the other slaves, and make sure that they watch. Because once you've broken the biggest, strongest one, everyone else falls into line. Well, Liverpool didn't fall into line, so thank you very much, Scousers.
Yeah.
Hats
And
off.
for Liverpool, I mean, to say no would be polite. Normally, we just say fuck off.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this means. This is acquiescence, right? We're holding up this illusion together, and that's what we need. We need someone with some testicular fortitude to just say fuck off. No.
Yeah.
This falls apart when everyone says no. We're all holding up this collective illusion together.
Oh.
And I've got a feeling we might be reaching that point.
No,
I'm seeing a change in the last week or so. Massive.
Let's get back to Serco now. Serco's facilities for holding people has an appalling track record of abuse and everyone that's there. Is this just another one of the elite's ways of having an outlet for human trafficking and paedophilia? I
think it is, because here's where it gets interesting. Serco run most of the immigration centres. A very famous one is at Yarlswood or Yarleywood near Birmingham. Sex rings, abuse, prostitution. Because we've heard about this revolving door of grooming and abuse that happens in care homes, where the kids go missing for the weekend. They come back battered and bruised and off their face on drugs. They're in the care home for another week. Then they disappear into the hands of the pimps. Now, that seems to be happening at the most infamous Serco immigration centre. But it goes deeper, because what Serco also run are the fast rescue RIBs, rigid inflatable boats, that the Border Force use. So when they say Border Force go out to rescue these migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, human trafficking victims, let's face it, that's what they are. These people in these boats are human trafficking victims. Well, you would assume that it's Border Force going to pick those up. It's not Serco. And when Serco pick them up, they are running the immigration centres. And obviously the immigration centres are getting the revenue when the prisoners go there, but they got paid for play. They get £800 or £900 per head that goes in there. That's like a commission. Well, guess what happens when the Serco run immigration centres are full from the people that they've been, and don't think that they're not linked to the NGOs on the other side of the channel. That Lawrence Southern thing, Beyond Borders, where they found the NGOs, these gangs that are basically rounding up the migrants on the continent, taking them for everything they've got, chucking them in the boats. It's all one big thing. So when the immigration centres are full, which are run by Serco, pay for play, where do they go then? Well, that's what Nigel Farage, whatever anybody thinks of Nigel Farage, is irrelevant, because what he found was true. 4-star hotels all up and down the country, full of refugees and asylum seekers, £200 a night hotels, which Serco are picking up the bill for, and then rebilling the government, paid for by us. That's pay for play as well. £800 or £900 a pop per head going into the hotels on top of the hotel bills. So it's all commission based. So they're actually run on incentives. Pick as many migrants of the channel as you possibly can. Fill up the immigration centres as soon as you possibly can. There's no incentive of them to deport anyone. They're financially incentivizing themselves to fill up the immigration centres and the 4-star hotels.
But if Nigel Farage is as bold as people think he is, and people respect him for being this outspoken guy and a man of the people in regards to what he tries to expose, he would know that Serco's behind this. he's got a platform there, and he could blow the doors right off
Well,
this at any
to
time.
be fair to him, when I watched the video, when he stormed into the hotel, he named Serco on camera. He said, "This
Right.
is a Serco installation." And this is the first that time, apart from seeing it on the garbage disposal, I'd heard Serco. So, like when I said before, I did my 5 days intensive research session, I just brainstormed with my intuition and I wrote down, right, prisons, immigration. And I remembered that Nigel Farage had said it. So I was like, damn, I think they're doing what George Soros is doing in the US, getting people out of the, well, but I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's alleged that what's happening in the Democrat-run states is that people incarcerated are being let out early. We've all heard about that.
Yeah.
And basically, essentially going straight onto an OSF, Open Society affiliated think tank or action group payroll to be a paid protester, $25 an hour to go around to be rent a mob. And it's been reported that people have been going into these hotels in America, and exactly like that SoCo run hotel pay for play here, they go in and the whole hotel is full of thugs. And the next day, lo and behold, a BLM protest pops up. So they're being shipped around the country. So I'd already heard about that. I've been researching that for a couple of years, that kind of stuff. So as soon as I heard this immigration thing, I was like, nah, I guarantee that's what they're going to be doing. And lo and behold, yeah. The thing is, right, these people have, once you know the modus operandi of the way they work, they're very, very predictable. They're very methodical, and they don't have any imagination. They always use the same methods. So once you know the way this system works, you can look down on it with a view of 40,000 feet, and it's very easy to see what's going on.
So, what do you know about these digital immunity passports that they're going to roll out supposedly when the vaccine's ready?
So the digital immunity passport is nothing more than the same as the track and trace system. It's exactly the same as the Chinese credit score I've been talking about. It's already happening in Ireland. So it works off a QR code. Just like track and trace, you have your own personal scannable QR code. Someone can scan you and you've got the yellow, red or green. Green means you can live your life normally. Yellow means you have restrictions. Red means you have to isolate. So essentially your whole life is run off a QR code of the 3-tier system. The way it works in China is when you cross a border into another province, they scan your QR code, like I said earlier on, and based on your level of infection, I guess, it will say yellow, green, or red, and you can carry on. So it seems like what's going to happen, or what they're attempting to roll out as we approach Klaus Schwab's utopian dream of the Great Reset, is that no one's going to be able to travel internationally without one of those digital immunity passports. And it looks like they will be linked to this new, very fast testing system that they've got, which by all accounts is not the same as a PCR test. That's all I know about it. I know that it works in 5 or 10 minutes, and it doesn't work the same as a PCR test.
Yeah, that you'd have to prove that you were vaccinated, though. That would be one of the stipulations, I'm assuming.
That is what down the line. The one that's working right now, or on the verge of being rolled out, like in the next couple of days in Ireland, works on a test, not on a vaccine.
Right.
But we can all see where this is going to go. Basically, what I think the digital immunity passport is actually a stepping stone. That's nowhere near the final solution. The final solution, that's not a very good term to use, I know. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's quite a fitting term to use, the final solution. The final solution is that we will have a biometric digital ID, which we wear. I've seen plans for the quantum dot tattoo, which is supposed to be used for kids. So it's like a transfer. So instead of having a hypodermic needle, which kids are scared of, you have a transfer, which essentially touches the skin, and it's got 400 hypodermic micro needles, which inject this nano ink. And in that nano ink will be your vaccine record, your biometric ID, your digital immunity passport, and everything, and your payment system all in one. So what we're seeing now is a precursor. It's what David Icke calls the totalitarian tiptoe. You can't go from A to Z because everybody will go nuts. You've got to go A, B, C in small incremental steps. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. And this is what I keep telling people. They say, why do you keep going on about the Uyghur Muslims and the concentration camps and the Chinese credit score? I said, because that's where the totalitarian tiptoe ends. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the Masters of the Reset, which is the reason that we're going through the COVID 1984 operation, their Agenda 2030 plan, linked with Agenda 21, when if you want to see what the future is going to be, you need to know about 4 different documents: UN Agenda 2030, UN Agenda 21, ID 2020, and the Gavi mass vaccination program. Those 4 documents tell you everything you need to know about the future. And the future basically is, if they get this right, and if this happens, is that by 2030, everybody else living on the earth that's still left will be living within cyber cities where there's no private property. Everything's run off a centralized AI control grid. One world government, one world currency, one world robotic police force. 95% of the Earth's surface for rewilding, no access for humans whatsoever. So it's basically, we're looking at what is it? Full luxury space communism, or whatever the Labour Party want to call it, totalitarian technocratic dictatorship. And that's, you know, and we'll look at what China is. You know, China are 3 steps further down the road than we are. You know, and if you're lucky in one of those nice provinces in China and you're a compliant citizen, wow, you can get some super fast internet and life is all smiles. But if you're an undesirable citizen, or if you're a Uyghur Muslim, you're on your way to the re-education center. And when I look on Google Earth, there's always a new re-education center being built every week in China. They have record building skills for internment camps and hospitals in China. They can throw them up like paper houses.
Yeah, we spoke with Kevin Annett on one of our
amazing
episodes.
man, an amazing man. I'd like to take my hat off to him.
Yeah, and when we were talking to Kevin, and I was aware anyway from his documentaries anyway, but you know, this re-education system, you know, was what was implied here in Canada, where they were taking the children, the natives, and taking the children away.
Yep.
And as they called it, re-educating them. But again, it's very much like we're saying with the Serco thing. It was nothing more than a thing for human trafficking and paedophilia again.
Yeah, because one class of those kids never came back, did they, when they went on a certain trip with some royal dignitaries, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite funny you mentioned Kevin Arnett, because I followed him very closely. And there's one video interview that I watched from him that led me on a whole different rabbit hole of research, because he's heavily been investigating the Vatican. And I never forget, a year ago, before the lockdown happened in 2019, I saw an interview and he talked about a mafia that was linked to the Vatican, a mafia that no one had ever heard of, or I hadn't. And I researched a lot and I never heard of them. They're called, it's very hard to pronounce and it's hard to spell, Ndrangheta. Have you heard of them?
No.
ND, Ndrangheta. Now, what Kevin Arnett said, now if you Google these guys, check them out. What Kevin Arnett said is these guys are essentially the Vatican's personal child and human trafficking mafia. They're from one province in Italy called Calabria. Vice magazine wrote an article on them, and they described them as the McDonald's of organized crime, i.e. they operate in every continent on earth, and they dominate every aspect of organized crime, from drugs, trafficking, racketeering, the lot. They based on an ancient Greek system like the fraternities in America, Alpha Pi and that. So they're like a secret society, and they work directly for the Vatican. Now, Kevin Arnett laid all this out, and I just stored it at the back of my head. Lo and behold, in March, while lockdown happened, obviously, Italy was very hard hit. Calabria was very hard hit. 700 members of Ndrangheta, including their leader, were arrested throughout lockdown. Ndrangheta were very famous for operating pizza parlors. And their pizza parlors were connected by chains of tunnels. And they're involved in child trafficking, and they work for the Vatican. In Calabria, I looked at the stats for the coronavirus deaths. And the Calabrian stats for coronavirus are almost exactly the same as the arrests for Ndrangheta. So I think that a massive takedown happened in the early weeks, throughout the weeks of March and April, because also in between, from my own findings, in between 200 and 300 Catholic priests were unaccounted for as well. They chalked that off to coronavirus, coupled to deaths, because they're elderly. There was also a number of raids of the Vatican. The Vatican offices were raided by Interpol on a number of occasions throughout lockdown. There was some auditing done for sure, and it seems like a lot of the child trafficking infrastructure might have been taken down. I've got a feeling that, you know, $100 million dent was made in their operation through some of the things that happened in lockdown.
And it's funny that you should say pizza, really, considering the Pizzagate scandal that went on in the US. But I am also hearing, and we spoke with Stephen Kelly, and he was saying, you know, about underneath the Getty, he believes that there's tunnels underneath the Getty there that's holding children. But I keep hearing things where children under New York, children under a different city, but I never see anything. But it seems to go in line with what you were possibly saying there as a big takedown.
It's problematic, right? Because here's the thing. There are definitely huge underground network tunnels that are pretty much hidden from the mainstream narrative. There is definitely trillions and trillions of dollars worth of deep underground military bases in America. You can look at the machinery that makes them, and you can follow the paper trail of the trillions of dollars that have been siphoned out of the Federal Reserve and gone into these black projects. There is definitely industrialized level ritualistic child abuse going on. So I don't doubt that deep underground military bases and these tunnel networks are involved in that. Now, here's the other thing. There are huge, huge, huge amounts of seismic activity that have been increasing and going on for the last 18 months to 2 years, which are mainly in North America and in Europe, and they seem to coincide with lockdowns to a certain extent. There is a number of researchers talking about these high-level special forces military rescues of thousands of children from underground bases, and some people are suggesting that these staged hardcore lockdowns, including in Australia, like in Melbourne, are actually because they're rescuing children from these underground bases. The problem is that there is no evidence of it. But here's the thing. If it's true, and they're rescuing high amounts of children that have been born in breeding programs underground that have no genetic parents, so they're not in the system, they will be completely deformed, adverse to light. So you'll only be able to take them out in the dark, because if someone's never seen the sunlight before and they're 8 years old and you take them out in light, it will do serious damage to them. So if it was true that you're going to be rescuing large amounts of these highly damaged, bred for torture children from underground bases, nobody would know about it anyway. It would not be seen anywhere. You can't present these children on the news. You can't reunite them with their parents because they don't have any parents. So, you know, I don't talk about it because I don't have any evidence. Doesn't mean I don't think it's true.
Right.
But, you know, I think I've got a feeling that, you know, the proof will come out in the pudding, because there is evidence of huge amounts of children being rescued this year, especially in the US. It's absolutely off the chain. The amount of internet busts of child porn rings, human trafficking rings being taken down, large paedophile rings being taken down, dozens, scores, hundreds of children being rescued. Thousands of children are being rescued. Just Operation Project Underground Railroad, which is a private project and an NGO set up by ex-military to combat human trafficking head on. They do amazing work. They've rescued 3,000 children in the last couple of years. Yeah. So that's one independent NGO, 3,000 children. So whatever anybody says, since 2016-17, there's been a massive assault on human trafficking and child trafficking in the world, and it seems to be working. I mean, but it also seems the problem was bigger than anybody had possibly imagined.
Yeah.
So one step forward, two steps back, maybe.
Could you tell us about your recent trip to Sweden and what you learned when you were there?
Okay. So basically, I was working in a hotel in central Stockholm. I was there for 4 weeks. Have a friend that lives in a suburb about 100 miles away, so I got to spend loads of time in the city. I went to the suburbs. I spoke to hundreds of people, and I'm quite militant about what I do. So I'm not a person that's down for small talk. So when I speak to people, when this is going on, COVID-1984, I generally will ask them, what do you think is going on? Now, I asked hundreds of people in Sweden. First thing I'm going to say is there are no visible signs of any coronavirus pandemic in Sweden. Life there, as I showed in my video, is completely as normal. Shopping centres are hustling and bustling. Shops are full. There is not a mask in sight. Nobody is social distancing. There are no lines on the floor. There are no queues. I spoke to my friend that lives there. Throughout our lockdown, nothing there was shut apart from restaurants for 1 week, had to do takeaway food. Nobody lost their job. Schools were not shut down at any point whatsoever. People were asked to be sensible, to wash their hands and to social distance. The whole time I was there, I was offered hand sanitizer once in the hotel. There is not a single visual sign that anything happened there. Now, Sweden, I'm going to say it, it's a bigger country than the UK, and it has 10 million people instead of 50 million, but it's much larger. Their population is much healthier. They're not obese. They do have fresher, cleaner air. But Swedish people tend to live in apartments rather than in houses. So although the country's massive, when they live in urban areas, they all live on top of each other, just like everybody else in the city. Their overall death rate is practically the same as ours. It's 0.05% of the country died. Whether they caught it or not, that's how many people of the whole percent of the country died. 0.06, we are 0.05. So we had a harsh lockdown. We're much more unhealthy with all the social distancing. And as a result, apart from 0.01, our overall death rate was the same as Sweden. You know, when I asked people in Sweden, what do you think of this? The first thing, 9 times out of 10, was they rolled their eyes. You know, it's not like, oh, yeah, I haven't seen anybody since March the 15th. You know, I haven't seen my granny. She's like, it's just, oh, stop talking about that stupid coronavirus. They just don't have it. They're simply not having it. I think at one point I sat on a bench. No, at one point in the hotel, I got into a lift with one person, and it's quite a small lift. And they looked at me and gave me the impression they'd rather I didn't get in the lift with them. Apart from that, there was no interaction at any point which said people are acting differently. And believe me, you know, I was there to make a documentary. I was only doing one show a week on a Saturday. You know, I've only got a handful of words to say. It's not a difficult job. So I had a lot of spare time, and I spent hours. I walked through suburbs. I walked through neighborhoods. I walked into housing estates. I walked through kids' playgrounds. And life was completely as normal. No one was doing anything differently. If you went to any other country in the world and then you dropped them in Sweden, you would not believe that it was on the same planet. You're saying, how could the rest of the world be reacting like this when this country is reacting like that?
Yeah. Are they, is it Sweden or Switzerland that are on a cashless society?
It was very difficult to use cash in Stockholm.
Yeah.
I couldn't, I mean, in the 7-Eleven, I could buy some sundries with cash. Shops, restaurants, bars, no. Hotel, no. Everything there is on QR codes, just like China.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I believe. People are going, oh yeah, but isn't it because people in Sweden have already got the microchip? And yeah, there's a few thousand people in Sweden, some trendy techie people that have gone for the RFID chip to get in the door. It's not widespread. But what is widespread is having to access everything through an app. So you walk everywhere, you see QR codes all over the place. What I wonder is, because Sweden are much further down the cultural Marxist equality agenda than the rest of Europe. They officially have a word for the third gender, whatever your opinion is on that. I've got no problem with the word for the third gender. It's the other 75 words I've got a bit of a problem with. But, you know, if you want a word to describe transsexual people, that's fine. They've got that. So it's called hen. You know, in their nursery rhymes, Superman wears a dress and stuff like that. So they're very progressive in that sense. They obviously have a lot of laws about equal pay. They're big on equality. They have a big problem with homeless people there, though, which I found quite strange, because I've always thought, you know, Sweden is this sort of, you know, this liberal utopia where everyone gets looked after. Well, I've never seen so many homeless people in my whole life. Much bigger problem than in London. You know, the only place I'd ever seen it like that was in Southeast Asia, where homeless people were collecting scrap metal, you know, cans off the floor with big sacks over their head, like some, you know, dystopian film. Stockholm was full of that, and Stockholm is a beautiful, clean city. You could eat your breakfast off the pavement in Stockholm, but then there's someone shitting in a bush right next to you. So it's a bit. It's hey, I thought it was lovely. I'm not going to diss Stockholm. Sweden's a beautiful place, and Swedish people are fantastic. But I do wonder if they were allowed to be the control, to be the test subject in this experiment, because they've been so cooperative with all of the other things that have been foisted upon them. And a couple of other people have said that as well. It's like, why were they given the opportunity to sidestep the WHO or the UN's plan. Maybe it's because they've been the teacher's pet.
Yeah.
And so, you know, because when you do an experiment, you have to have a control. You have to have a test. You have to have, you know, someone that gets the placebo.
Wasn't Belarus also a country that didn't lock down as well, or and there was maybe another one?
Right. Here's a good one. When I first started investigating what was going on, I noticed that there was a lot of I noticed there's a lot of African leaders that weren't playing ball. And the guy from Belarus was another one, because someone came up to me at the first protest that I interviewed someone. They said, "Oh yeah, have you seen that Belarus's stats? Only 70 people have died." So I went back and I fact checked him, and I made a whole episode about it. And I said, "It's true." And it turned out that the president of Belarus had turned down a lot of money. Well, what happened? Like 2 weeks later, he'd been in power for like decades. I mean, he was a dictator, but he'd been in power for decades, no problem. Huge uprising, color protest, George Soros style. Burundi. The president of Burundi kicked the World Health Organization out and said, "No, not having it." Because let's face it, these people in developing countries in Africa, they've been on the sharp end of the stick of what we're all about to face for a long time. They've been the testing ground for Bill Gates and for Gavi. They know what the score is because it's already happened to them. They're not dumb. So Burundi said, "No, we're not having the World Health Organization." 2 weeks later, he drops dead with a heart attack, 55 years old. Andy Jolene, I think that's his name, Madagascar president, he really pissed off the World Health Organization because they have a plant that grows in Madagascar called Artemis, and it has a natural quinine in it. Quinine is the ingredient in hydroxychloroquine. So they made a drink called COVID Organics. Now, the World Health Organization wrote this. They did not like that. They wrote a article saying, with a picture of an African person with a dirty bottle of water, like a plastic bottle of brown water, "Don't drink herbal remedies; they might kill you," or something along those lines. Well, Andy, I think his name's Jolene. He said, "You know, I'm a proud Madagascan, and my culture is herbal remedies. We pick our berries and our fruits from the jungle, and we make our herbal remedies. That is our culture. Who are you to tell us?" Would you know how many deaths they've had? 3. Because they drink this thing with quinine in it all the time. Same reason that I believe that a lot of the African nations weren't hit with it. Because the African nations, the people play in the dirt, they have a much stronger immune system, and they have a high level of hydroxychloroquine in their bloodstream because they're all taking anti-malarial drugs. So hydroxychloroquine is a whole rabbit hole. And as soon as it was talked about, I knew that this was a marker. As soon as Elon Musk suggested it to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump stuck it out and said, "Let's try hydroxychloroquine," and everyone jumped on him, I said, "Right, let's keep an eye on that because that's very telling." So yeah, lo and behold, they've got a drink that's got hydroxychloroquine in it in Madagascar. No one got it. And there was one other one, Tanzania, the guy that swabbed the pawpaw and the goat. Yeah? Now that was just great. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Really funny. And just a little anecdote here. You've heard about people doing the blank swabs and sending them back and they come back positive.
Yeah.
Well, I watched a YouTube video last week. This is before I got deplatformed. It was before the track and trace debacle. And there's this guy from up north called Luke, and he's a DJ. He's got quite a big following, 10, 20,000. And he's like, "Right, I've been watching some crazy videos about coronavirus online." And he goes, "I've got the coronavirus test. People have been swabbing a puddle, swabbing their dog, and it came back positive." And as he pulls out the swab, he's got his laptop open. And his laptop screen is my homepage. And he'd been watching and as he's got the swab out, it's the Rise Above home screen with all of my videos.
I saw that.
Why do they fake the deaths? And I was like, "Oh my God." And you know what? No one spotted it. I saw it randomly. Someone said, "Look at this video. The guy's done the fake test." And I was like, "Oh my God, what's that on his screen? That's my music video." And I just thought, do you know what, man? If this guy has just, as I started watching YouTube, seen one of my videos and thought, I'm going to do that for myself. And he did the experiment, and lo and behold, because he lives up north, which is one of those high risk areas where they want the positives. So that was a real surreal little moment of synchronicity for me. I tried to get hold of the guy. I wanted to get him on the show, but I think he got a lot of attention for it, and then he just wanted to sort of disappear.
Right.
But you know, if someone wants to go out and do that themselves, and they share a video, and that gets 20,000 views, and 20 other thousand people have a light bulb's gone off, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's it. Speaking of animals, today Canada said it had its first COVID dog case
Wow.
I mean, they must think we're barking mad ourselves, but has anything as crazy come up in the UK yet?
Well, we've got COVID sniffer dogs that were announced yesterday.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Oh,
Right,
wow,
so
yeah.
I was interviewed by the Really Woke Show, a really cool little podcast, a couple of days ago, and they brought this up. And they said, "What do you think of it?" And I said, "Well, here's my first question: how do you train a sniffer dog to sniff out coronavirus? Because I have a basic rudimental understanding of how sniffer dogs work. They can usually specialize in one category. It's usually broken up in between like narcotics, gunpowder and explosives, cash, because they're three quite different smells. And obviously in narcotics, there's lots of different smells. Some sniffer dogs can be a jack of all trades, some specialize. So I was like, here's my first question. How do you train a sniffer dog to sniff out coronavirus? You're going to take it to a hospital with loads of people that are infected and coughing and spluttering. And what has the dog got to sit there and get used to it? Because the way you train a dog to fiend for the smell of cocaine, cash, they have to get used to the smell and they have to get to know it and like it. That's why when the sniffer dog turns up and the tail wags, he wants that smell. He wants what you've got in his pocket. That's how the mechanism of a sniffer dog works. So you're going to basically have to train a sniffer dog to get addicted to smelling coronavirus. But if what you've said is true, that a dog can now contract coronavirus, how the hell does that work? What, you just completely, you just repeatedly infecting a dog with coronaviruses, breathing in the aerosol viruses over and over again. Isn't that dog going to die?
Yeah.
I know. I don't know. The thing is, like, when I do my public speaking, I do the videos. I'm always getting to a point now where I don't even want to talk about coronavirus anymore.
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where
I know.
anyone that's got an IQ of over 85 is a sentient, conscious being, or has got at least one eye 1 millimeter open, can tell that this narrative is totally finished. It's over.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone's caught up with that fact. But this is what I'm going to say to people on Saturday when I do speaking. The sad thing is that although it's over, we all know it's over, and everyone else is going to come to that realization. The architects of the Great Reset are not going to finish with coronavirus.
No.
They've got something else already lined up, whether it's another virus, a famine, whatever it's going to be. They're not going to go quietly.
Do you think it could be the financial collapse?
Yeah. Well, the way that I look at it is this is the way I conceptualize what's going on. It's obvious that this pandemic is being either completely fake and simulated or blown out of all proportions. So why are they doing that? Because this is the question. Why would they do that? Well, they're doing it to have a justification for the lockdown. But why would you want to shut down the economy? Well, the most obvious answer you can quantify to people is the same reason that we had a massive crash in 2008. They throw out the debt bubble, they lend lots of money that people can't repay back, and then they take real assets that are actually worth something. That's a very simple mechanism for people to understand. So the first thing I say to people is, that's what's happening times 100. But it's much worse than that. Because obviously, if you know anything about the fiat monetary system and fractional reserve lending, you know that it's a finite system. It's a confidence trick. It's Babylonian money magic. It's conjuring, whatever you want to call it. It can't last forever because it's not real. And what we have been doing for at least 10 years, or not us, but the you-know-who's have been doing, is they've been artificially inflating a system that is always going to explode.
Yeah.
And basically what this Great Reset is, it's their version of a controlled explosion so that they can pick up all the pieces afterwards. So when people say, why would you shut down the economy? It's like, well, if the self-appointed masters of our realm just announced on the TV that we're going to end capitalism and private property and trading as you know it, we're going to wipe the balance of everything to zero, and we're going to introduce a new system. Might be a bit of a backlash if you said it like that. However, if you use the guise of a global pandemic to very slowly, systematically, in stages, shut down the world economy and doing it in a controlled way where you can slowly transition tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people onto UBI or whatever it's called in that country, stage by stage, because that is the goal. You know, in 20 or 30 years, the fourth industrial revolution will render 90 to 95% of the working population redundant. Apparently, this is what is projected. So it seems what they're doing is they're speeding it up, and they're trying to do it. They're not admitting that that's what's happening. Because, you know, if you told people that, it's a totalitarian tiptoe. If you told people that by 2030, this is what's going to happen, well, we'll go crazy.
Yeah.
And they should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We've been hearing about a possible UK lockdown, a national lockdown coming, an announcement that could be coming. Have you heard, what have you been hearing about that?
Well, this is what I've said. I've been following the paths and the patterns of the lockdowns, and I've been looking at astrological and lunar cycles as well. The word lunar, lunacy, lunar, lunatic, lunatic, if people don't know, that comes from the lunar cycle. So a lunatic is someone that is on the power of the lunar cycle. Comes from every month when the full moon, when the lunatic asylums are full up, when everyone goes crazy because we're 80% water. And if you believe what real science says about the moon, and it has an effect on the tides, so we're intrinsically linked with the lunar cycles. This month is a very weird one. You have a harvest moon every year. You can have a blue moon, which happens every 3 years. This month is really weird. We've got 2 full moons, one on the 1st, one on the 31st. It's a blue harvest hunter's moon. It only happens every 36 to 40 years. The first full moon was on the 1st of October when Boris announced the rule of 6, or as I call it, the rule of 666. It's 6 people, 6 feet or 2 meters apart for 6 months. So it's the rule of 666. I've predicted, and I hope I'm wrong, I honestly do hope I'm wrong, that the full national lockdown will be either announced or enacted by the 31st, which is the actual blue harvest hunter's moon. So, but Boris only announces things, or things only happen on Fridays or Mondays. I don't know if you've noticed that. When we have an announcement or a lockdown in the UK, it only ever happens on a Friday or a Monday. I don't know why they choose that. So I think what's going to happen on the radio today, I've heard the words full national lockdown 32 times. I've got a bit of a Rain Man thing going on. I sit at work all day listening to the mainstream media radio in the background, BBC. As much as it pains me, people say, how can you do that? But I believe if you want to be a light worker, you have to move in the shadows. There's no point in standing in a totally illuminated room shining the torch around because it's already bright. You've got to know what everyone else is being programmed with if you want to help try and deprogram them. So I listen to the BBC all day. It's not good for my
I was going to say, it must be something hard on the head.
I let it go in while I'm working. And yeah, they mentioned full national lockdown 32 times today. France has gone into full national lockdown. I believe Germany has. You know, obviously we're regional here with England, Scotland and Wales and Ireland. Wales has gone full national lockdown. They've stopped, I'm sure you've seen this, they've stopped them from buying non-essential items, which includes kids' clothes, toys, sanitary towels.
But booze is okay though, right?
Oh yeah, litres of vodka on sale, £8.50. They've got a special, you know, so when you're locked down with all your kids in the house and there's nothing to do, you can't buy any toys, games, DVDs or books, only litres of vodka, sweets and fast food.
Yeah.
So obviously everyone's health is completely paramount. So, you know, I really hope I'm wrong, but everything I'm hearing today, because these people always tell you what they're going to do ahead of time. They always signal what's going to happen. I really think that we're probably going to be announced to be going into full lockdown. I guess it would happen on Monday, but it will be announced by the 31st, which would unfortunately make my prediction come true. That's the way it's looking. You know, I hope I'm wrong. With all my predictions, I usually hope I'm wrong. I usually turn out to be right, unfortunately.
Yeah. We predicted a second wave in October anyway, mainly because this is where the flu and cold season would normally start.
Yeah, and the rollout of the flu shot.
Yeah,
right.
I don't know if you know, but the British Medical Journal have admitted, is it being MIJ? It's been admitted in a few of them that especially the nasal spray flu shot for kids makes people 60% more susceptible to coronaviruses.
Yeah, I saw some of that research. Yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, when the kids have when you have any vaccine, there's a shedding period afterwards. So you're putting a bit of the recumbent virus into you, and then you pump it out, and you actually become infectious to other people, and you can infect them. But that nasal spray that they've given to kids, which they've been doing for the last few years, and they really rolled it out this year, that has a particularly long shedding period. So it says, I've read the insert, and the shedding period in that vaccine is like 12 days. So, and lo and behold, and I looked on on Facebook on the mum and dad's groups of all the schools, regional schools. It was rolled out in a 3-week period, across 3 weeks for different regions. 10 days later, cases everywhere.
Yeah.
It's very obvious.
Yeah.
I know
you only need to look into this a cursory amount, 30 minutes a day, Look at the ONS stats. Look what's happening. You know, with the it's obvious. You know, the flu season starts. People start having colds, which is coronavirus. Here's another thing, right? Most people completely disregard the fact that they stopped calling it COVID-19 about 2 months ago. Did anybody notice that?
Yeah, I did.
Because you know, and here's another thing, and I don't want to tell anybody how to suck eggs, but COVID-19 is a concept. It's not anything, because it's apparently a respiratory disease which is caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 is SARS, selective acute respiratory syndrome. Selective acute respiratory syndrome. Yeah, SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-1 is just SARS. So that's the virus. COVID-19 is, I think it's the name of an operation. But so they stopped calling things COVID 2 or 3 months ago. And then they also stopped reporting deaths, which I found really weird. So now it's corona cases. Well, as anybody knows, a case of a coronavirus includes a common cold, a rhinovirus, SARS, MERS, and about 6 other types of coronavirus. It's a huge category. But here's where it gets even weirder. 2 weeks ago, Public Health England decided, I think it was week 41, to stop having separate flu and COVID reports and to officially put the reports together. And I put a post about it. And obviously the usual detractors said, oh, you're just chatting shit again. They're going to put the reports together, but they're still reported separately. And I looked at the report because, you know, one of those people that I like to get the report and read it from front to back and every single word in it. That's how you find out what it says. And yeah, there was a section that said coronavirus. There was a section that said flu. There's a new section called ARI. Acute respiratory, no, ARI, acute respiratory infection. And that involves flu, influenza A, B, and 3 others, all coronaviruses, and pneumonia. So now we've got a super category, acute respiratory infections. And the first thing I said to everyone, make sure next time they upgrade the reporting system, because they change it every 3 or 4 months, make sure they're not reporting ARIs, flu, pneumonia, and coronavirus, because it's very obvious that's exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah, just to ramp the numbers up.
Yeah, and where did the flu? I was looking at the stats. Where did the flu go this year, anyway?
Well, it
went away. It just disappeared.
It's an amazing miracle. Maybe for the first time in recorded history,
yes,
Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck and all the vaccine companies have got it right, and they've eradicated flu. Now that's a possibility. The other possibility is what they've actually just done is reclassify flu as COVID. I think you know, Occam's razor might come into effect here.
Yeah. Now, do you believe moving forward for people, as people are waking up and people are wondering what they can do to combat this coming so far down the road, do you think that a mass non-compliance could be the solution to bring the oppressors to the knees?
It's the only solution. Here's what I say to people. The reason I wear the T-shirt that says rise above and not rise up, I don't believe we can fight this. And you don't believe we should try to fight it. You cannot fight a force that has the 100% ultimate monopoly on violence. It's a waste of time and it'll never work. What we need to do, and my belief is that through gnosis and through understanding, we need to empower everyone that we can, because we are holding this up. The self-appointed guardians of this realm, while shepherds or whatever they believe they are, they might be evil and they might have nasty plan for us, but they still believe in free will. And I know this because I've studied what they believe in great detail. They still believe in free will, and at some level they believe that we have to consent to what's going on. This is why people say, oh, do you think you're a prophet? No, I don't. I think I can read. And I read the plans of the World Health Organization, the Wuhan hoax organization, and the UN. And they're very, very, very graphic in their description of what they're planning. And I believe, and I think this is what they believe as well, that is their form of soft disclosure. It's their form of saying, this is what we're going to do. And your quiet acquiescence, whether you read this report or not, your quiet acquiescence is your consent. So if we can, every day, with every action, every interaction, every word, every thought, every seed that we plant, if we can empower other people to have the balls and have the fortitude to stand up and say, I have observed this reality around me and it is not what I'm being told, it stops. It doesn't even need 50% of the people. Nowhere near. Some people have talked about the critical mass of awakening being like 10, 15% of people, like the 100 monkey effect. You know, you don't even need most of the people. You need enough people to make a visible option for people to step over. And this is why I've changed my mind about protesting. Because for me, protesting is not standing outside with a sign asking for things back. It's making a stand of defiance and setting an example to other people. It is absolutely fine to continue living your life as if nothing is wrong, because nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
Not more wrong than it was before this stupid COVID thing happened anyway. There are plenty of things wrong, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, another meme I shared, it's like people are saying that 2 more weeks to flatten the curve, or, you know, you guys that are not wearing a mask, your non-compliance is what's continuing this. But that is nothing further can be from the truth. The only thing that's continuing this is people's compliance.
Yeah, when we spoke with Cal Washington, we talked about the consent, and obviously he's heavily involved with the legal side of things. But he said even the law itself, it goes beyond that. It's a spiritual level where, you know,
Absolutely.
as you say, if you go onto the likes of the World Economic Forum, they are laying everything out. And over the years, it's everything that we think has been bad. They have actually told us what's going on. In one way or another. Even when you look at the likes of Hollywood movies and things that
Yeah.
are put out on the TV, it's all there to let people know. And it's almost like it's their way of breaking out of being spiritually responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the point I was trying to make. What some people have called it predictive programming.
Yeah.
And maybe it is like a form of predictive programming, like a form of soft disclosure. Because some people say, you know, when the Wachowski brothers, or their sisters now, wrote The Matrix, what were they trying to do? Because then, whatever people say about The Matrix, when I did my university degree in media studies, which is a bit of a Mickey Mouse degree, but it helps me analyse the media, which I'm putting to good use now, I hope anyway. It's no exaggeration to say that at least 7 or 8 different lectures were mostly about the Matrix film, about its underlying themes, about how it you know, postmodernism, everything. It has everything in it. It even have the references of different philosophers, you know, Descartes, things like, you know, the metaphor that the Matrix put together is so strong that you think, well, what were they trying to do? Were they trying to warn us? No, I don't think they were trying to warn anybody. I think it's like you say. I think pieces of art are allowed to be put out like that as a form of this is what's going to happen. This is what we're doing to you, and we will hold it right in plain sight. It's hidden in plain sight.
Yeah,
I think that's the notion, hidden in plain sight. But the crazy thing is that people can't seem to see things that are hidden in plain sight.
No. Does that mean that the V for Vendetta might be their movie of solution?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I'd like. Do you know what? I haven't seen that movie for a very long time, and I feel like I'm being a bit slack now. I feel like I need to watch it again because I know
Well,
how
it's all-
poignant.
I watched it about last month.
Yeah,
It's all
Again.
about the government releasing a virus. So, yeah.
yeah. I mean, and it's in 2020, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember enough to know that there's stupid amounts of parallels now. I mean, it's like that Contagion film from 2011 or 2012, I think.
Yeah.
What is it? There was a person in that film which appeared as themselves. It was some sort. I think he was a UN or a WHO person. He appeared in the film as himself, sat at a desk talking about the contagion outbreak with his name on the screen, and they showed a screenshot of him talking about the coronavirus with his name at the bottom of the screen. It's the same guy. He was wearing the same colour suit, the same colour shirt as in the movie.
Yeah, I've seen
saying practically the same words.
Wow.
Now I looked at that and I was like, right, is this foretelling? Is this prophecy? Is this predictive programming, or are we living in a holographic
I was
simulation?
going to say, is it like a parallel universe or something? Our last podcast we
when
had
they
with
switched
Cynthia
on
Sue.
the Large Hadron Collider in 2012, did they rip a hole in the space-time continuum? And are we on a parallel timeline?
Yeah, right. Anything at
something
this
I
point,
ask
anything's
myself.
possible. I think.
Hey, I've read a transcript of one of the people that works at CERN that apparently was an off-the-cuff conversation about when they first switched that thing on. And it's alleged that they, you know, whether this is true or not, I've got no idea, but it makes sense to me. Apparently, when they first switched that thing on in 2012, because you know it was switched on and then it was switched off for a large amount of time and it came back on again funny enough,
Yeah.
turned back on by Tom Hanks. Not many people know that.
Oh no.
Tom Hanks switched
Wow.
it back on. But the first time it went on, apparently, what happened was, they obviously playing with technology that they hadn't really used before, and someone claimed that it ripped a hole in the fabric of our reality that was 2 microns across, like, a super, super small amount. But obviously, a hole in the space-time continuum of any amount is a pretty significant thing. And they believed a bit like the Montauk project. Maybe they were talking about things coming through entities, and then we get really far out and stuff, which is quite interesting. And I like to speculate about things like that. It's quite fun. But when you build a large hadron collider and you're looking for the God particle, is it that much of a stretch of imagination that a side effect of the project might be that you would accidentally rip a small hole in reality and create a wormhole to somewhere else?
But
What is the God particle? What's the Higgs boson? If that's supposed to be the fundamental particle behind the creation of matter itself, you're looking for that. That seems like a pretty messy experiment, and it doesn't sound out of the question that you might accidentally do something like that where you're looking for the God particle. Doesn't seem out of the question to me.
You know which statue's outside as well, don't you?
Shiva,
Yeah.
the destroyer and creator.
Yes.
Yeah, they're dark occultists. These people study the ancient religions.
Yeah.
And I keep saying to people, I say, if you really want to spiritually arm yourself with the knowledge that they have, you need to learn about natural law, about the power of vibrations, colors, frequencies, numbers, and symbols.
Yeah. And that's
Yes,
what David Icke
because-
said too.
Yeah,
That's what David Icke, when we talked to him, he said the same thing. He's like, I asked him, I said, what can people do to help themselves? He said, first of all, they have to realize what they're dealing with, what they are, right?
You have to understand
power
what
they have.
reality is and what we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah,
That's right.
Because I've been preparing this speech for Saturday, and I really want to blow people away. But this is what I've said to them. I said, at the end of the day, we're not at war with a virus. We're at war with an ancient evil force, and the 3D manifestational representations of that force on Earth, what they think they are. They understand everything about us. They're master psychologists. They've been studying our psyche for thousands of years. They also understand everything about the nature of reality, an understanding that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in advance of modern science. But what they also understand is the symbiosis between those two things, which is our perception of reality. And this is what David Icke talks about when he talks about the perception deception.
Yeah.
And that's how we can write a book that thick about the perception deception, because it's everything.
Right.
I haven't even read that one yet. I didn't get to that one.
I've got it here.
I'm sure it's excellent.
It's incredible.
But they understand exactly how we work, and that's how they've done such a number on us. The problem is, for them, this knowledge has been occulted successfully for millennia. So for millennia, for hundreds of years, the vast majority of people have been scratching around the dirt in complete and utter ignorance, complete illiteracy. The people in the palaces and the castles had all the secrets. They also employed the only scribes that could read and write. If there was a printing press, it was owned by them. So they had absolute control of the information.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for them, in 1983, the internet was created. And now I have the access to all of the information that all of mankind has ever accumulated, and I can access it anytime I want, wherever I want. I might need to use a firewall or a Tor browser or whatever to get to the hidden parts of it. That's a real problem for them, because the information is not occulted anymore. So I can go on the internet and I can study Mark Passio or other sort of ex-Satanists, and I can learn about natural law. It might take me weeks and weeks, but when you understand the power of frequencies and the resonance and what they understand, it really makes the world a different place. And that's what I've tried to do. I've been very militant about my research and my investigation over the years, and I've paid a big price for it in my social life and my business. It's cost me thousands of pounds. I've been not invited back to certain festivals, and I know I've lost a lot of work because of what I spoke about. I don't care. There's more important things. But once you understand what these people understand, looking at their methods is a lot easier. They're very, very predictable. Very predictable.
Do you think the British royal family are done, and will eventually be publicly disgraced and removed from the throne?
I hope so. I think it's like this. Since when do people abdicate from the royal family? In modern times, they've jumped ship for a reason. Those two,
Right.
they're still globalist.
What did they know? What did they know?
Yeah,
Too, right? Like, and
Andrew,
just the timing
right,
too,
Prince
right?
Andrew, the toothpaste is never ever going back inside the tube with Prince Andrew.
Right.
Never. He can squirm and sweat as much as he likes. He is staying the royal family. Here's an interesting link with Serco. Serco, right? The CEO of Serco is a guy called Rupert Soames, and his brother is Sir Nicholas Soames. They are the grandchildren of Sir Winston Churchill. Nicholas Soames is best friends with Prince Charles, very famously best friends. And who else is best friends with Prince Charles? Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
So Nicholas Soames and Baroness Soames go back a long way with Jimmy Savile. His brother, who's the CEO of Serco, is on Guess Who's flight log with his
Epstein.
wife. Epstein.
Yeah.
So two brothers are friends with the two leading, whatever they want to call those two, procurers, wizards, sorcerers, information assets. Jimmy Savile and Jeffrey Epstein are two peas in the pod. They might have been working on different sides of the Atlantic, on different levels, in different circles, but they were serving exactly the same purpose. So we've got Nicholas Soames and Rupert Soames, grandson of Winston Churchill. Each one of them is linked with these two characters. So the child abuse, the ritualistic child abuse and all that, there's a link there between the military industrial complex and the intelligence agencies. And it's not a small link, it's a fundamental link. I did some research into John Bennett Ramsey. You know about John Bennett Ramsey?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The American girl there that died. Yeah.
To say that right, the John Bennett Ramsey case is like Madeleine McCann, Jeffrey Epstein, and everything. It's all rolled into one. There's links with. I don't know if I want to say this is going to be a whole episode, but there's links with Lockheed Martin and John Bennett Ramsey's father. Lockheed Martin is linked with Serco and with Epstein. There's a very, very strong narrative between islands, paedophile rings, aviation companies, and the military-industrial complex. And this goes back to the 60s. Goes back to something called the Finders. You've heard about the Finders?
No.
The Finders is a declassified piece of FBI or CIA information. I can't get it around the right way. In the 60s, there was a satanic child ring, child sacrifice ring, that the CIA were involved in the 60s. And the FBI investigated it in the 80s and found that the CIA were intrinsically linked with satanic ritual child abuse. And this is declassified, and you can read it. It's all online. This is linked in with the John Bennett Ramsey case, with Lockheed Martin, and with this whole string of MK Ultra. Oh my God. Just remembered, it even links in with Alan Dershowitz. When they raided John Bennett Ramsey's house, they found a VHS tape in there, and it was an instructional video of how to MK Ultra mind control someone using a handheld stun gun. Alan Dershowitz found the tape, and the person in the tape that was being stun gunned was none other than Kathy O'Brien. Yeah, you know who Kathy O'Brien is, the Transformation of America, one of the very famous people that was interviewed by David Icke.
Yeah.
So she was featuring in a CIA instructional video of how to literally break someone down using a stun gun to do trauma-based mind control on them. And that was found in the house of the Ramsey parents by Alan Dershowitz, of all people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
When
it comes full circle.
When we spoke with David the other week, he was telling us about the MK Ultra program, and obviously her daughter was born into that program as well.
Yes.
And Kathy O'Brien, you know, he hadn't heard from her for a while, but Kathy O'Brien's daughter had called him, and she says, "Listen, David, we've got this link." She said, "When I was a child, part of the MK Ultra program was to put masks on everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about dehumanization.
Yeah.
When you put on a mask, you're taking away your voice, and you're also covering your mouth and your face. So your facial expressions can't be seen by anyone else. And this is one thing I've always said through this mask debacle. I feel sorry for deaf people.
Yeah.
Deaf people that rely on lip reading, now they're really living in a quiet world. You think a quiet world is quiet for deaf people? Well, when they can see people's lips and they can look around and they've got a visual representation of the speech, they can make the sound in their head. It's called synesthesis, where you cross over between your senses. Well, when everyone's wearing a mask and deaf people are walking around and they can't see anyone lip reading, that's a real quiet world. So yeah, this whole mask thing is definitely about dehumanization. Here's another important point. Does anybody remember 18 months to 2 years ago, where on the app Snapchat with the facial filters, all the young teenage girls were taking pictures with what on their face?
Mass.
The mask.
Yeah. I've
Now
seen.
I've got two thoughts about that. Was that predictive programming? Was that social engineering? Or were they beta testing the facial recognition AI? Because obviously, right, the facial recognition AI on Facebook, for instance, is pretty good. You can upload a load of photos. I look quite like my brother. We're not twins, but we look quite similar. If I upload my photos or his photos, sometimes we get tagged as each other. It comes up with the automatic tagging. So it's been learning us over the years. But obviously, if you're covering 50% of your face, which is the most malleable part of your face, apart from the eyes, most of the expressions come from here. The AI will need to be configured to that. Yeah. So I do wonder if that whole operation of millions of young teenagers all over the world constantly uploading photos of themselves with the mask on was like a testing or a rollout phase for the facial recognition to get used to be able to identify people when they have the bottom part of their face covered. I wonder that.
That's interesting.
With the facial recognition, I know while we're on it now, Serco own all the traffic lights as well, don't they? And
Yeah.
and I think that's where they're going to put the facial recognition cameras.
Yeah, they own the infrastructure for the traffic lights in London and Dublin, a few Canadian cities and a few Australian cities. The traffic control, air traffic control. So you're absolutely right. Not only do they have the facial recognition cameras, it's also got the ANPR cameras on that. So let's face it, right? If they're controlling the track and trace app and you've been told to isolate, or if when the COVID operation's over and we're just living in the Chinese style system and Serco has said you can't leave the house, when you go outside, they control the infrastructure that's got the facial recognition cameras. I found out what they also run. Did you know there's a high-powered surveillance satellite system run from the UK called Skynet?
I've heard, yeah.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Serco run that too. Chinese have another system called Skynet. There's also one in almost every Western country has a Skynet system. And from what I've seen, it's essentially the satellite that can zoom in and count the hairs on your head from up there. So it's the satellite that can see you, you know, like the Will Smith movie, Enemy of the State. As soon as he goes outside the house, he's on it.
Yeah.
That's what the Skynet system is. So those are the people that are going to be telling us whether we can leave the house or not, based on an alert on the phone.
Yeah.
You know,
and
again, like I said to people are worried about the applications like TikTok, like Snapchat, and they're worried about the permissions. When you sign up to the permissions, read the small print. Can you imagine the small print on the you know, when you're given Serco a backdoor into your phone?
Yeah.
And they know that nobody ever does, because people don't care. They just, and they never will. It's just like, you know, if people actually read it, they'd never ever download any app ever. Probably, you know.
No, you never would.
You never would.
No,
I like that.
Especially not TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you got going on coming up in the next little while? And I'd like to ask you, where can we find you online? Like, do you have a website?
Okay.
I know you're on Facebook and YouTube and everything, your channel.
Basically, I'm still on YouTube. I haven't been taken down yet.
Right.
My artist name is the word double, LMC. That's how I always appear. All of my videos are on the double LMC page on YouTube. I've also backed everything up to brand YouTube, so it's backed up. All of my work is on the YouTube channel. The COVID 1984 series I put into bite-sized episodes, and they're designed specifically to shake people that are still sleepwalking. I start off with fake deaths, ID 2020 vaccines. It's a program. It's like a 6-step program to try and de-indoctrinate people. That work is designed specifically for sharing. apart from that, I'm doing public speaking wherever I can. On Saturday, I'm speaking in Bournemouth Town Centre in the south coast of UK. On the 7th, I'm speaking in Farnborough. On the 14th, I'm speaking in Truro. I actually got invited to speak with David Icke this Saturday in Birmingham, which was massive for me.
That's awesome.
But I couldn't let down the people of Bournemouth because there's a few coachfuls of people coming from other places. So David will have to wait. Hope he doesn't mind. But so yeah, basically I will be attending more protests in London. You haven't seen the last of me. I'm just getting warmed up.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I say to people, like, you know, years ago, people said, "Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing?" I said, "Look, I know what's going to happen one day. So I'm going to start warning people about it now. Well, now it's happening, and there's no way in 20 years' time I'm going to be sitting in whatever world we're sat in then, saying that, yeah, I knew this was going to happen, but I didn't say anything." You know, when my kids or my grandchildren look up to me and say, "What did you do when this happened?" I want to say that I did everything I can to stop it, or at least to try and empower other people to stand up to it. Because I'm not here to tell anybody what to think. I'm here to present information that I've found, try and present it in a way that it makes sense to other people and they can make what they want of it. And generally, when people see the information that I'm presenting, they say, "Please, can I have some more?" Or a couple have said, "Please, that's enough. I don't want to know anything else." But usually it's like, "Wow, now my eyes are open. What else is going on?" So yeah, I'm going to be speaking. All of my music that I put out. I don't speak about gold chains or my Mercedes. I only speak about these subjects. You know, a lot of the music I wrote 4 years ago was talking about what's happening right now. So go back and check it out on YouTube from 2016. A lot of people think I wrote that in lockdown. I wrote that stuff 5 years ago. So please check that out. It's all conscious stuff. And yeah, rise above.
Yeah, we're gonna put all your links to all your social media, and we'll put those in the show notes. And
I'm sure I'm going to be taken down soon, but they're going to have to try harder than that. I was fully operated. Yeah, I got taken down. I was back and fully operational in 3 days, and I'm stronger than I was before. So you need to try harder.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So do you have anything further for Lance before we sign off here, Chris?
No, I mean, I can only say, Lance, you know, thanks for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
You know, and together, as long as we all continue doing what we're doing, you know, for us and you, life is never ever going to be the same again. And if we all keep pushing forward together, we are going to make that difference. I am well aware of that.
Absolutely. And I'll say one last thing. If they weren't losing control, they wouldn't be trying so hard.
True.
Okay.
Very true.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
I've had an easy ride for a very long time. The toothpaste is out of the tube and it's never, ever going back in. Rise above.
Yeah, that's a good way to end it. And I just want to thank you so much, Lance, for taking the time to spend with us tonight.
No,
and
it's been awesome.
Great. Yeah,
I'd like to come on. Yeah, please. I'd like to come on again. There's going to be no shortage of things to talk about, and I've got plenty more to say.
Yes, I was just going to ask you that. So that's great.
I jumped straight in there. I'm coming back.
You are coming back on. So yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up. Yes,
right,
we'll
guys,
definitely.
Thank you so much. So yeah, double LMC on YouTube, Instagram, and the show is called Rise Above.
Awesome. So like we say every time when we wrap up, love one another, believe nothing, and question everything.
Yes.
And thanks a lot. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, guys. See you next time.
Okay.
Cheers. Thanks, Lance.
Peace.